cracking, everybody? About to head off to bed, and I was just thinking about. I try to think of what can I do, like what can I talk about, because unlike a lot of these other guys that I see they put out a lot of content. Um, they can come up with a lot of topics and ideas. I don't know. It's like for me, it's harder. I don't know why. But one thing I was thinking about was thinking about the Bay, Pelican Bay. That prison has a reputation, like a mystique about it. And so I was thinking about the first time that I went to the Bay. So the first time I went to the Bay, I remember hearing about that. I said in another video, I remember hearing about the Bay when I was in YA. A bunch of young ass knuckleheads on the yard. We were at the handball court, actually. Well, on the yard in the back where we play handball. And somebody was saying, I don't know if it was a family member of theirs or somebody was there, and the old rumors, the shower comes to the back of the cell and your mail is on a screen and there's zero contact, all that crazy shit. And I remember, you would think like a normal person would think, shit, I don't want to go to a place like that. But every one of us little knuckleheads right there were like, I'll be there. Of course, there was probably a couple that were saying that just to fit in, but unfortunately, I meant it. And so, just a few years later, I was there, right? And I remember driving up there. My first joint was New Folsom. I remember driving up there from New Folsom. And when you leave, when you go to the Bay, unless it's special transport, it's never a straight shot. You always lay over somewhere. 90% of the time, it's two joints you're gonna lay over at: San Quentin or Tracy. I had one time where we laid over in Corcoran Shoe for 3 months. I think I was on a layover, and from there we went straight to the Bay. And I remember it was 13 hours it took to get from Corcoran to the Bay. But every other time, we laid over somewhere, either San Quentin or Tracy. And first time I went, we laid over in San Quentin. And so the next day when we went up there, and back then it was different. Back then, they hadn't started doing that, single cell stuff and trying to keep everybody, there was a lot of murders going on in the shoe back then too. But the way it was back then was like they would call your name, right? The shoe staff would get everybody's pictures, boom, and they'd put them in like alphabetical order, whatever fucking order they felt like putting them in. And they made an announcement: if I call your name and there's a guy in this bus that you want to sell up with, that individual stands up at the same time as you, right? And so that's when, it was different, because if there was an issue, if somebody had issues and they wanted to make sure they were in a position to deal with it, they would, when it called one's name, the other one would get up and they would go, and whoever would throw them in the cell together. Whatever happens, happens, And remember I was young, 21, 22. I was 22, I think. And my Sally was at least 10 years older than me. And it was funny because it was his first time going to the Bay. He had been to Corcoran. And, they called his name. I stood up with them and we went to the cell. And, they went to the strip cell. They stripped us out and everything, put us in the cell. And I remember to this day, again, this vato was minimum 10 years older than me. And I remember he stood in the middle of the cell after they took our cuffs off, and he put his hands on his hips and he was looking around and he goes, Pelican Bay. And he went like this. And I looked at him. I told him, shut up, man. What the fuck are you doing? And he was like, nah, and like everybody, you hear so much about this fucking place, and here I am. But I was a snapper, so I was shut your stupid ass up before somebody hears us. But I knew the dudes to be able to talk to like that, And it was a trip. Back then, you used to go to C1, and you would see you would get classified, right? There's no fucking classification, but anyways, and then from there they would kick you to a building, right? So, and I remember leaving C1 for C4, and the shoe was so much fucking different than when you're out on the yard, When you're out on the yard, there's always that tension. Everybody listening to everything around them. That's one thing about prison. When you're in a very serious place, you feel it in the air. It's like something you can feel on your skin down there, and when something happened, but they probably got away with it. You can feel there's a shift in the air, And sometimes it'll be that a certain area of the yard quieted down, and so that something just happened. You'd be on your toes, But going to the shoe, Pelican Bay shoe, everything was, let's put it like this. Pelican Bay shoe was like Harvard and Oxford and Princeton and Yale and like every fucking MIT of criminality. It was, when you went there, whatever your knowledge of criminality was going to be concentrated. It was going to be extremely potent by the time you left, right? Which, I don't want to get into all the ramifications. I would just say this. I mentioned it before when they had that like now people are running around and they shut that place down, but before, there were, I think it was 1,500 people, 1,600 people, depending on double selling or not. Could be a little more. Not every one of them was a lifer. And the CDC wasn't offering any type of rehabilitation, any type of positive programming. And, there were a couple incidents where people paroled from Pelican Bay and cop murders right in the community. I mean, and so they stopped letting people parole from there. But that was the game that the CDC was playing. But anyways, getting back to wherever the hell I was going, because I'm tired and I'm just talking, you know. But so being, you know, Harvard, MIT, whatever you wanna compare it to, it was also the most respectful place I ever did time. You know, every time I went up there, it was the same. And I remember the pot I was in, E-Pod, C4 E-Pod, and I think the day after me and my Sally moved in, they ran canteen. They would run canteen once a month. Back then it was $35. And back then it wasn't like now where, you know, well, before they shut it down, it wasn't like that where you could get beanies and thermals and, you know, all the different shit they could. Back then it was the bare minimum, and $35 is what you could spend, right? And I remember when they would pop out each cell, and they went down, boom, got their canteen, and on their way back to their cell, it didn't matter if it was you know, I don't use the labels that the CDC uses, you know, but I'll say, you know, one of them OG black dudes from, you know, had been back there forever in the shoe, you know, going back to Quentin and Bo Folsom doing shoe time then, and then, you know, to Corcoran, to the Bay. So, you know, he came and introduced himself and dropped off a bag of canteen. And my Sally and I were like, "Hey, gracias." And when he walked off, we looked at each other like, "What the fuck?" Like, it's like that here? Like, whoa. You know, and Raza from up north, and like everybody knew we had just got there. We didn't have our property, and every cell, regardless of where they were from, whatever, they went and grabbed their canteen and dropped off a bag. And that's how it was. Now that said, it was an extremely miserable existence. It was, you know, I mentioned it before. You know, everything is painted white. Everything was extremely quiet. It was a lesson in sensory deprivation. It was a constant oppression. But it, you know, as much as the CDC had focused on oppressing and trying to cage in and break people's minds, the most beautiful artwork you could ever find was created there. Literature, guys were writing books, short stories, novels, whatever. Guys were using the M&Ms, separating them by color, dropping them in water and creating paint, using the hairs from their, you know, their beard or their head, and creating paint brushes. the ingenuity. You know, when I look back and, you know, I tell people when I've spoken to people, you know, like square people out here, and I've told them, you know, the greatest fucking business minds, the greatest artists, they're behind those prison walls. If given an opportunity to come out and taught, because they have the foundation, especially in the business mind, especially in their drive and their determination. If given an opportunity to succeed out here, they would exceed anyone else's expectations but their own, because they know. Guys that have been in there and that had a life sentence, they know there's nothing that can stop them. They have a fire that nobody else can understand, you know. But anyways, it's a long video. See, it's at 16 minutes already. I know majority of guys that look at my videos, from what I see, they only watch about 6 minutes of it. So you missed the best part, sucker. All right, man, I'm out.